Hello and welcome to the Spotlight Vancouver, Washington podcast. I'm your host, Doug Varinas, licensed realtor in Washington and Oregon, helping you reach your real estate goals and dreams. And today on the podcast, it's going to be Portland versus Vancouver. We're going to strip away the hype and the clickbait and look at an overview of the stats from schools to crime to taxes to everything you're going to want to know to make a decision if you're sitting on the fence. I definitely have a bent here because I live in Vancouver, but I'm going to try to be as even-handed as possible to make this as valuable as possible for you, so stick around. Also, stick around until the end. I'm going to tell you how you can get a 1% temporary buy down paid for by my preferred lender. I'll tell you how to do that at the end, so stick around. But we've got quite the show today because, as I mentioned in a previous episode, I was thinking of doing some clickbait-worthy anti-Portland material when Portland was going through a rough time during the pandemic. And we all kind of know what happened. If you don't, it was an ugly scene there. Just with the open-air drug markets, the trash can fires, the riots, for lack of a better word, protests, depending on who you ask. Portland was going through a tough time. I think since the pandemic has ended, things have gotten a little bit better. And so I think now is a good time to have an even-keeled discussion about Portland versus Vancouver and who is better suited for which one. So that you might be listening to this, maybe you're living in Portland, maybe you're in Vancouver, you're thinking of making the move across the river and you're wondering, what's the pros and cons? What does it look like? I'm going to try to give an overview of that and break it down so, again, you can get all the information you need to make a decision. So I appreciate you listening. Thanks for the likes, the subscribes, the comments, the shares. They all go a long way into spreading the word about the podcast, and I'm super grateful for it. I'd like to just give you a little overview on my journey to Vancouver because I think this year or next year I have lived in each city an equal amount of time. Like I lived in Portland for 11 years and I think it's going to be next year I would live in Vancouver for 11 years. So I do have experience living in both cities for quite a while. And my journey to Vancouver began when my girlfriend, now wife, and I were looking at homes. And, we had lived in Portland, kind of in the city center, urban center. We lived in the Irvington neighborhood together. And we both had graduated from grad school and were moving on in our careers. And we were looking for a home together. And we wanted to stay in Portland. And during the 2015, the market was pretty hot. It was actually really hot. Multiple offers, over asking, crazy over asking. And so with our realtor that we were using, we were finding ourselves being pushed further and further east, past 82nd Avenue, which if you live in Portland, and especially at that time, past 82nd Avenue is like Mars. It was another planet. It wasn't really Portland, and we were still getting outbid on homes that we were kind of not super excited about. And so I started looking in Vancouver because I had gotten a job working at the Vancouver School District as an occupational therapist, and I was interested in finding out more about Vancouver and the tax, because there's no income tax here. That was definitely appealing to me. I had found myself like I wasn't going out as much. I don't know, I'm settling down. I had a fiance. We were looking to kind of move on, and I just found myself open to the possibility of living in Vancouver because I was going to be working there, and it was more affordable. And I thought I could get a similar neighborhood because I was looking for that kind of neighborhood feel, older homes, and, similar to what I'd find in Portland, similar to what I wanted in Portland. And so I had to do a public relations campaign with my wife about it. And it involved riding our bikes up to Vancouver, and we toured kind of the uptown neighborhood, we were basically kind of downtown. And that's where most of the, shops were and the kind of neighborhoods that we wanted in Portland. Oh my goodness. Are you kidding me? I am. Okay. I thought I was offline there. So we had, I had to take her and do a publicity tour. Like I was all in at that point because, we were seeing homes that were significantly less expensive in areas that felt like Portland. basically, to us at the time. And so with a lot of cajoling and some convincing, I got my fiance, my girlfriend, and now wife, again, to agree to move to Vancouver, and we did. And we haven't regretted it since, and we've done very well. But that was kind of our journey. Like we were sort of reluctant Vancouver folks. And, now it's a little bit of a different scene. I think people are seeking out Vancouver and wanting to come to Vancouver for some of the reasons that I'll mention. But again, this podcast is about Portland versus Vancouver. So let's talk about some of the real estate related statistics. The median sales price in Vancouver currently $562,000. The surprising thing is Portland's median sale price is $538,000. And, 10 years ago, you'd never see this. It would be impossible that the median sales price in Vancouver would be higher than Portland. But here we are. It is. Days on market in Portland, 84 days, 63 days in Vancouver. So, kind of similar market statistics. And it's, very, very similar real estate market, very similar 5-year appreciation. But what I think you're seeing is the market is appreciating more in Vancouver because more people are moving here and seeing the advantages. Portland's still a desirable place to live, and we're gonna get into that. But the housing markets have performed similarly over the last few years. When we talk about sort of the overview of Portland, you got about, in the metro area, about 650,000 people there compared to about 200,000 in Vancouver. Obviously, if you include Hillsborough, Beaverton, Gresham, it gets into almost 2 million. And then in Clark County, you might get up to like maybe 300,000. So Portland, obviously a lot bigger. The economy's bigger. There's more going on in Portland as far as restaurants, as far as museums, as far as performance venues, what we call, I guess, culture. More in Portland. There's just more going on there because it's a bigger metro area. The economy in Portland, the biggest employers in Portland are the hospital system, Providence Health System, and then it's Intel, and then Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, and then Nike, and then Legacy. Well, OHSU recently bought out Legacy, so that's going to make them one of the biggest employers in the Portland area. So basically, it's Nike, Intel, and hospitals are the biggest employers in Portland, where in Vancouver, the biggest employers are also hospitals and schools. So the Evergreen School District, the Vancouver School District, and then you have Peace Health, and then to a lesser degree, Legacy are the biggest employers here. So similar economies, but obviously the Intel and Nike kind of are super big players in Portland metro area and one of the largest employers. When it comes to taxes and property taxes, I was surprised to learn that like the property taxes are assessed a little bit lower in Portland. I think it's 1.07% compared to 1.25%. Obviously, there's a bunch of levies and other taxes that I feel kind of level the playing field. So when it comes to property taxes, I'm going to call this a wash because I think they're both fairly expensive as a West Coast city goes. And so I'm going to give that a pretty even keel there. So as you probably know, or maybe you don't, there's a sales tax. There's no sales tax in Portland, in Oregon. There is an income tax. So if you live in Multnomah County, that number is going to be about 9.9%. So almost 10% income tax. In Vancouver, there is a sales tax of about 8.6% and no state income tax. So there's, that does make a big difference because if it's up to me, I'm going to take no income tax because I don't have a choice on whether that gets taxed or not. Like I have a choice on whether I buy things or not and where I buy them, but I don't have a choice on, them taking out income tax. And this can save a lot of money. Like I remember when I first moved over the bridge, it was saving me like $500 a month. And so I'm definitely going to give the advantage to Vancouver in that regard. From tax purposes, especially income tax, it's pretty cool to not have to pay state income tax. Now, people who live in Vancouver, you can take advantage of the no sales tax and the no income tax. So there's plenty of people that do their shopping at like the Airport Way, Costco, and they don't pay any sales tax there when they do their shopping, and then they take all their stuff across the river, and then they don't have to pay income tax in the state of Washington, and so they kind of just avoid all taxes. I don't do that. I'll do that for bigger purchases. Note to self, don't try to do that with a car, because they just get you on registration. So when you go register, you have to pay the taxes. So you can't go buy a new car, at least from a dealer in Oregon, and then bring it to Washington and think you're not going to pay sales tax, because you do. But for other big purchases like appliances, or, if I have to buy home improvement products, I will go to Jansen Beach. So the whole reason Jansen Beach exists basically is to provide some tax benefits to people coming from Vancouver, to be honest. And so for bigger purchases, I do make that trip to save myself some money, and it's pretty significant. So for taxes, I'm going to give the nod to Vancouver. And like I said before, obviously I have some skin in the game. I live in Vancouver, but I don't see why, if you worked in Vancouver, you wouldn't want to live in Vancouver. So as far as that goes, like if you're commuting into Portland, you still have to pay the Oregon income tax based on where you work. But if you're able to work remotely, like, if you work for Nike, I have a friend who works for Nike, and he does most of his work remotely, and he can take advantage of the no state income tax. But as soon as you go into work, you will be taxed at that, Oregon state income tax rate. Again, consult your CPA about that, but you do calculate the number of days you're there versus home. But again, not financial advice. Check with your CPA, but that's a big advantage not to have that income tax. Stepping into the realm of crime. This is where we get into sort of that pandemic recent history, where crime in these big cities, kind of all across the U.S., increased dramatically. And we saw that pretty dramatically in Portland. And what happened was they decriminalized all drug use and possession, with the intent being, I think, good intentions, like let's not put minor offenders in prison for minor drug offenses. But unfortunately, what ended up happening was it just became an open air drug market. Like it was pretty bad. Obviously, it wasn't uniform throughout the entire city of Portland, but it was unsightly. And that, combined with the growing number of people experiencing homelessness, there were huge camps, and Portland's always kind of had a liberal camping policy. And so that got exploited to the point where it was pretty bad. And it was a shame, really, to see it. Areas like Delta Park and the 205 corridor and Johnson Creek area just became huge homeless camps, and then just a lot of pain and misery, basically. I remember driving to Portland at night and just seeing all the trash can fires, and it was a shame to see. And then you had the George Floyd protests, and that kind of just destroyed downtown. It to the point where the businesses haven't come back. Like I went there not too long ago, and there was still a lot of abandoned businesses. And unfortunately, it just seems like it's been tough for the city to deal with these problems in a way that's been effective. And they're not the only city to have these problems, but they just have not been able to get a handle on the drug use and the issue of homelessness, to the point where it became unlivable. And I think it's gotten better. I haven't seen as much, because what they did was they recriminalized drug use, and that went a long way into, I don't think it solved the problem, but it definitely put it more underground and less in people's faces. And we can all debate on whether that's effective or not, but at the end of the day, it did increase livability. And so I think it's gotten a little bit better, but there's just more crime in Portland. So poking around on an interactive crime site, I will post these in the show notes. I have a LexisNexis one that does lot interactive. You can check on where crimes have occurred and what they are. And then I have some stats for Portland crime. I think homicides in Portland are currently at 80, which is, I think it's lower than it was. It was in triple digits during the pandemic, where it's there was 12 homicides last year in Vancouver. There's a lot of property crimes and assaults. I think there's 50,000 property crimes in Portland last year, and somewhere around 6,000 in Vancouver. So again, we're talking, this is a scale thing too, because the population in Portland's about 3 times that of Vancouver. There is less crime overall in Vancouver, and it is, crime's a tricky thing because depends, it's not all located in the same place. It doesn't happen at the same time. You can always be in the wrong place in the wrong time and experience a crime. When I lived in Portland, I never, I had a bicycle stolen one time. I wasn't a victim of crime. I didn't experience that. And so I felt very safe in Portland. And maybe that's changed. I haven't lived there in a while. Same thing in Vancouver. I've never felt threatened, felt in danger. So, crime's one of those statistics where, really you can look at the numbers, but it's going to depend on your experience with crime and where you're at. And again, there's a lot of factors. But for me, overall, more crime in Portland, more property crime, more homicides, more gang activity. Not that we don't have these things in Vancouver, but there's just less overall. And so I'm going to give the nod to Vancouver in this too. Again, I was reading an article that actually crime went down by about 7% year over year. The perception of that is not that, though. I think if you talk to people in Vancouver, they'll tell you that crime is increasing, especially property crime. That's big here. Break-ins, some robberies or burglaries, but I think car break-ins are big, as they are in Portland. So for this, I'm going to give the edge to Vancouver. But let's move on. Schools. So, man, schools is another tricky one because I always tell people, like, you can go on these rating sites, check the school ratings, and they're not accurate because the turnover from year to year can make a huge difference. Like, they get a new principal, there's new teachers, somebody leaves. You really need to do your work on the ground to find out what's going on at that school. So these are just some, overarching stats. I mean, and basically, graduation rates and dropout rates, test scores. For Portland Public, the graduation rate is 81%. So that's kind of abysmal. That's crazy. That's almost 20% of the school population not graduating, which is nuts to me. With a dropout rate of 6%. So not great. For Vancouver and Evergreen school districts, the graduation rate is 86%, 87%, with a 4 to 5% dropout rate. So not super great either. A few years ago, I would have given the edge to Vancouver, no problem, because a lot of the schools in Portland were falling down. Like, they had structural issues, like big time, like almost like condemned status. Through a number of levies, they have rebuilt schools and sort of done the repair there, as they have in Vancouver. Vancouver also has had several levies that have been approved, and new schools have been built and repairs have been made. So I don't think there's a huge difference there. The test scores for math and reading are below standard for all those school districts. Portland Public, Evergreen, Vancouver, not great, not meeting benchmark. They're working on it. As far as the schools go, it's a tough one. I mean, I'm tempted to just give it a wash and say they're both kind of even. I guess that would be my official answer. But really, I just think with the big city influence, like, I'm very protective of my kids, and so I want them to have less exposure to like big city issues, whatever they are, that kids are exposed to. And I think that in Vancouver, you get less exposure to that in general. Although, again, depends on the school, depends on the peers. It's hard to say. So I'm personally going to give the edge to the Vancouver and Evergreen school districts. But again, statistically, the edge does go to Vancouver and Evergreen, just with those dropout rates and graduation rates. But it's close. And again, it's a very personal thing. Again, best to get some information on the ground to find out, the quality of that school that you're thinking of sending your kids to. The political vibe, I think something you have to mention. So for somebody thinking of moving to Vancouver versus Portland, obviously Portland is it's a liberal city. I mean, that's kind of what it's known for. It attracts people from all over the country looking to tap into the ethos of like being artistic, being free, the liberal ethos. So it's a liberal city. It's a blue city. Where I think Vancouver is, I'm gonna say it's more centrist. So I don't think it's super conservative. It's a pretty live and let live city in my experience. It definitely leans more center right. And so if that's an issue for you, or if that's something, if you see like a Trump flag in somebody's yard and that's really triggering for you, like maybe Vancouver isn't for you. Again, depends on the neighborhood. So like how Carter Park, Lincoln, sort of west of the 5 tends to be more liberal, like closer to the river seems to be a little bit more liberal in general. Where Portland, I feel like across the board, like you're not seeing a lot of MAGA hats in Portland. And whether that's a pro or a con to you, it's just something that is. I do think we've seen a general failure of some of these blue cities to address issues like crime, like shoplifting. It's legal, it's fine. Same thing with the drug use and homelessness. We've seen cities like San Francisco kind of falling apart, in Chicago. I mean, I think you can put Portland in that category. So I don't know where the city of Portland is going. It just tends to be kind of a race to the extreme in my estimation. And so I don't know where it's heading, but it's definitely it's a blue city. And if you're not comfortable with that, Portland probably not for you. Vancouver, I think you can find a place. People aren't going to bug you. I'm just going to give an example of an election, a result that we had recently, like a state Congress. I believe it was Joe Kent, who was a pretty conservative candidate, like pretty right-wing candidate, versus Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, a Democrat, but very centrist, like very, I don't know, to me, seems very common sense candidate. And she won in like a landslide. I don't think it was that close. And so I think that's a good example of Vancouver in general. Like we're just sort of in the middle and we appreciate moderation. And that's been my experience. So if you want to roast me about any of this stuff, please let me know in the comments about your experience. I'm trying to keep this as even-handed as possible. And, if you disagree, yeah, feel free to let me know about it. I would appreciate it. And let me know what your experience has been living in Vancouver or Portland. But it is a factor, is the political leaning. So so that kind of brings us to which city is right for who? Like who might be a good fit for Portland and who might be a good fit for Vancouver in general. So for me, Portland, the people who are going to enjoy living in Portland are, I feel like they want to tap into like the bigger economy. So the people that work at Nike or Intel or other creatives are going to, in general, I think people want to be in that scene. Like they want to be near the restaurants and the bars and the music venues and things are happening, are going to want to be in Portland. Now, some of those people that work at Nike and Intel and stuff, they'll move to Hillsborough or Beaverton to get out of Multnomah County. So that's another story. But in general, those people are going to want to be in the metro area. So anyone who wants to tap into a scene and have a lot of that access to that stuff. Now, if you live in Vancouver, you can still drive over the bridge and take advantage of any of that. It's a little more inconvenient, I guess, but really it's a 10-minute drive south, depending on where you live. Yeah, so I think people who are more left-leaning politically or maybe identify with the community that is stronger in Portland than it would be in Vancouver. And those people are probably going to are more likely to be in Portland or be attracted to what Portland has to offer. So in general, it's going to be, maybe dual income, no kids, dinks who want to tap into, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I'm just trying to create a profile of somebody who might be more attracted to Portland. So, double income, no kids, want to take advantage of all the amenities of Portland, more liberal leaning, are okay paying the extra taxes for it. They don't really mind that. They're going to want to be there. I think Vancouver is, it's more of a suburban feel. There's some good restaurants. There's there's things to do here. I never run into a shortage of events or things to do, but there's just not much as there is in Portland. So I think if you're looking for like a more suburban, maybe a little slower lifestyle, like having all those amenities right near you isn't as important. you might be more attracted to Vancouver. I do think the school issue for me as a parent, I'm going to want a little bit better school district. And so I think you might want to check out Vancouver if you're thinking of having kids or you have kids. I think the school districts in this area are just a little bit better, a little bit less exposure to big city issues. I think the tax advantages of Vancouver are huge. So if you can work remotely or if you work in Vancouver, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to live in this area. Like, it's a pretty big financial advantage to come to Vancouver and not have to pay income tax, state income tax. And again, if you want to go over the bridge, do all your shopping there, come back over, you can live the tax-free life. For convenience sake, I tend to just do most of my shopping, like grocery shopping and stuff. I stick around here in Vancouver and I just pay that sales tax, that 8.6% sales tax, which is no small thing. Like I said, I will go to Jansen Beach or somewhere in Oregon to buy like an appliance or a big ticket item. So those are the, people I think are going to gravitate towards each city. Again, really depends on your personal situation. Like, it's a very personal decision. So this is just designed to give you an overview. And I hope I've been able to do that today. Both cities offer pros and cons. Both cities have their challenges, like any metropolitan area does. But I hope this kind of overview has given you a little bit better idea of the situation of each city and, what they both offer. So thank you very much for listening. As I promised in the intro, I want to throw out an offer of a 1% lender paid buy down on a mortgage. So I'm going to have a link to this in the show notes as well. But my friend and colleague, Trevor Bonnet at Guild Mortgage, is offering this 1% lender pay down on a mortgage. You have to go to guildmortgage.com/Trevor Bonnet. NNT. Again, I'll have it linked, and you can start a discussion with him about how to get this 1% buy down on your mortgage rate. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Take care out there. I'll see you again next time.